Picture this. I'm standing in front of a heavy-duty, locked steel gate, the kind you usually see guarding a prison, not a residential street. Flanking me are two deputies from the Blackwood County Sheriff's Department, looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. And right in my face, veins bulging in her neck, screaming at a decibel level that could shatter glass, is Corinna Stiles. She's the HOA president of Timberline Heights. She's called 911 on me 3 times in 4 days, and right now, she's demanding the deputies put me in cuffs for trespassing on her private community road. I don't interrupt her. I just let her vent, let her dig that hole deep, and when she finally stops to inhale, I pull out my phone, bring up the county GIS map, and turn the screen toward her. "Ma'am," I say, and I swear I've never been this calm in my entire life. "You just put a padlock on my driveway. See, you think I'm trespassing, but the reality is, I own this entire valley. I own all 12,000 acres of it. I own the road we're standing on, and coincidentally, I also own the ground underneath your $900,000 modern farmhouse." You should have seen the color drain from her face. It was like someone pulled the plug in a bathtub, just instant pale, and the deputies, they awkwardly shuffle back a step because suddenly, the power dynamic in the air shifted so hard you could feel the wind change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind 3 months, back to when I was just a burned-out tech bro in Seattle, running on caffeine and anxiety, completely unaware that I was about to walk into a war zone armed with nothing but a box of old papers and my grandfather's stubbornness. It all started with my grandfather. Everyone knew him as Grandpa Red Thorn. He homesteaded this valley back in '52. Just him, the mountains, and a work ethic that would kill a normal man. He built a cabin by hand, raised my mom there with no electricity until the '70s, and he taught me everything I know about the outdoors. But in '89, medical bills piled up, and he had to make a deal with the devil, or rather, a developer named Castellano. Red sold him just the lower meadow, 45 acres of flat land, with very specific conditions. Take the meadow, build your houses, but the upper valley, the spring, and the main access road stay mine. Fast forward to 2025. Red has been gone for 15 years, and I'm drowning in code and imposter syndrome in the city, realizing I haven't been back to the cabin since the funeral. I decided to pack up, move to the cabin, work remotely, and fix up the old place. So I called the county for permits, and the clerk says, "Oh, you mean the place above Timberline Heights?" And I pause, because I have no idea what Timberline Heights is. Turns out, while I was away, the subdivision expanded, a new developer came in, built 40 luxury homes, and formed an HOA that acts like a sovereign nation. I drove down there, truck loaded with tools and groceries, expecting a wave of nostalgia, but instead, I find stone pillars, iron gates, and a sign that says private community, residents only. I'm confused, so I call the number on the gate, get a voicemail, leave a polite message, and wait. 45 minutes later, I decide to walk around the gate to check my property, and that's when a pristine white Range Rover comes screeching up the gravel road, spraying rocks everywhere, and out steps Corinna Stiles, phone already recording, dressed in clothes that cost more than my first car. She hits me with the "you're trespassing. I'm calling the sheriff" routine before I can even introduce myself. I try to explain, "Look, I own the cabin up the road," and she cuts me off with this smug, condescending smirk, telling me, "There are no legal residences above us. That shack was condemned. You need to leave." She didn't know who I was, didn't know I had the deed in my pocket. She just saw a guy in work clothes and assumed she had the power. When Deputy Carter arrived the first time, he was exhausted, clearly sick of Corinna's drama, and when I showed him my tax records, he looked at her and said, "Ma'am, this is a civil dispute. He has proof of ownership. I'm not arresting him." Corinna punched in the gate code, 99,241, with this look of pure hatred, and told me, "This isn't over." I drove up to the cabin, and it was rough, broken windows, mouse infestation, but in the closet, behind a false panel Red had built, I found the Holy Grail, a fireproof safe containing the original 1952 land patent and the 1989 sale agreement. I sat on the dusty floor and read the fine print, and my jaw hit the floor. The agreement said the developer had an easement to use the road, subject to an annual maintenance fee, and if that fee wasn't paid for more than a year, the easement terminated. I did the math. Nobody had paid the estate a dime since Red died in 2010. They owed me 15 years of fees, plus interest, which meant their right to use my road had legally evaporated over a decade ago. I wasn't just the owner. Legally speaking, the HOA had been trespassing on my land for years. I called my college friend Elena Rossi, a shark of a real estate attorney in Denver, and when I sent her the docs, she started laughing. This terrifying, gleeful laugh. She said, "Lucas, they don't just owe you money. They owe you their existence. Let's send a notice." We gave them 72 hours to remove the gate. They ignored it. So, I grabbed the biggest pair of bolt cutters Home Depot sells, drove down with the camera rolling, and snapped that chain like a twig. That's when Corinna's lawyer, a guy named Mr. Barnes who looked like he hadn't opened a law book since 1990, slapped me with an emergency restraining order and a lawsuit claiming I was the one harassing them. Things got dark fast. Corinna held an emergency board meeting, didn't invite me obviously, and levied a $5,000 special assessment on every household to fund the lawsuit against me, telling the neighbors I was a squatter, a drug addict, a danger to their children. But there was one guy, Mr. Sato, a retired teacher on the board, who smelled a rat. He came up to my cabin, looking nervous, just wanted to know the truth. I showed him the maps, the patent, the defaulted contract. The poor guy looked like he was going to be sick. He told me. She told us the county owned the road. We had no idea. Mr. Sato revealed that Corinna wasn't just the president. She ran the management company that collected the dues. She was profiting off the conflict. And her husband? Arthur Stiles, a disgraced former planning commissioner who retired early to avoid an ethics probe. I realized this wasn't just a property dispute. This was a fiefdom, and I was the barbarian at the gate. I set up trail cams and caught Corinna's Range Rover creeping by my driveway at 2 a.m. She was trying to intimidate me, but all she was doing was giving me evidence. We went to court on a Friday. Judge Vance was this no-nonsense woman who looked like she could see into your soul. Mr. Barnes stands up and starts blabbering about implied easements and community safety, and Judge Vance just cuts him off, looks him dead in the eye, and asks, "Counselor, do you have a deed? Yes or no?" Barnes starts sweating, shuffling papers, muttering about finding documents, and Elena just stands up, cool as ice, and lays out our royal flush, the patent, the default notice, the survey. The judge denied their restraining order immediately, but gave them 2 weeks to find proof of ownership, basically giving them enough rope to hang themselves. Corinna confronted me in the parking lot, hissing, "You think you're smart? I know people." I just told her to have her lawyer call mine. But Corinna wasn't done. That weekend, a construction crew showed up and installed a second gate, this time at the very bottom where the valley road meets the highway, technically on their 45 acres, blocking me in. It was a loophole. I owned the road up the valley, but they owned the sliver of land connecting it to the public highway. Elena told me it was legally murky. We'd have to fight for an easement by necessity, which could take years. Then, they dug a trench. A literal trench 6 feet deep across the road, claiming it was for drainage, trapping my truck at the cabin. I was stuck. I sat on a boulder, staring at that trench, feeling the anger boil over, ready to do something stupid, when I remembered something Red used to say. If you control the water, you control the valley. I scrambled back up to the cabin and dug through the safe again, looking for one specific piece of paper, the water rights certificate from 1968. In Colorado, water law is everything. First in time, first in right, and Red had claimed the spring that fed the entire creek 50 years before a single foundation was poured in Timberline Heights. I hiked up to the spring house, a stone bunker Red built, and traced the pipe. It ran downhill, right past my cabin, and fed directly into the subdivision's holding tanks. The realization hit me like a freight train. Their entire luxury lifestyle, their green lawns, their showers, everything ran on my water. I called Elena and asked, "What happens if I turn the valve?" She went quiet for a long time before saying, "Legally? You can. It's your water. Practically? It's the nuclear option. You'll be the villain of the century." I told her, "I don't want to shut it off. I just want them to know that I can." While I was holding the water card, help arrived from an unexpected place. A journalist named Sarah Jenkins, who'd seen a Reddit thread about my situation, drove up. She was an investigative reporter who specialized in land fraud. We spent all day going over the documents, and she started digging into Arthur Styles. She found the smoking gun. Arthur had voted to approve the subdivision expansion while his wife's management company was already under contract to manage it. It was textbook corruption. Sarah published the article on a Friday. HOA warlord blocks owner from his own land, while husband hides ethics violations. It went viral instantly. The comments section was a bloodbath for Corinna, but the real damage was inside the community. Mr. Sato and the other board members realized they had been lied to, fleeced for legal fees, and were now publicly humiliated. They called a secret meeting without Corinna. Corinna, desperate and spiraling, made her fatal mistake. She filed another lawsuit against me, claiming I was running an illegal business from my cabin. To prove it, she submitted photos taken from inside my property line, next to my bedroom window. She had just submitted evidence of her own criminal trespassing to a court of law. Elena saw it and literally cheered. We filed criminal trespass charges and a motion for declaratory judgment the next morning. Then came the HOA meeting from hell. Tuesday night, packed clubhouse. Corinna tried to take the podium, but Mr. Sato stood up and invoked a bylaw suspending her for conflict of interest. She screamed, she threatened, she actually tried to grab the gavel, but the room had turned. Mr. Sato laid it out. We have spent $70,000 fighting a man who owns the road we drive on, and who controls the water we drink. The silence in that room was heavy. I walked in, invited by the board, and stood before these people who had been told I was a monster. I kept it simple. I don't want to fight. I don't want to cut your water. I just want my grandfather's house. Here's the deal. You acknowledge I own the valley. You pay the back fees, about $50,000 over 10 years, which is cheaper than your legal bills, and we share maintenance. Or, I cut the access, I fight you on the water, and we spend the next 5 years making lawyers rich. The vote was a landslide, 29-4. Corinna and Arthur were the only ones visibly fuming. She stormed out, screaming that they were all idiots, that I was blackmailing them. But it was over. The board authorized a settlement. We drafted the papers. The HOA acknowledges Lucas Thorne owns the land. They pay the fees. The gates come down. And, at Elena's suggestion, they had to install a plaque at the entrance honoring Red Thorne. The signing ceremony was at the courthouse. Judge Vance looked at the settlement and said, "This is how adults handle things." Corinna didn't show up. I walked out of there feeling lighter than I had in years. A reporter asked me, "Why didn't you shut off the water?" And I said, "Because my grandfather wouldn't have done that. He believed in being a neighbor, even when the neighbors weren't good to him." But the story doesn't end with a signature. 2 days later, I'm on the roof fixing a leak, and I see the white Range Rover pull up. My stomach tightens. I climb down, ready for a fight. Corinna steps out, and she looks deflated. Smaller. The rage is gone, replaced by something that looks like exhaustion. She didn't come to scream. She came to talk. She admitted it. "I didn't know," she said, voice shaking. "When I took over, the developer told me the road was ours. I believed it. And then, I just couldn't be wrong. Being the president, being in charge, after Arthur lost his job, it was all I had." It was a moment of clarity. She wasn't a supervillain. She was just a sad, proud woman terrified of irrelevance. She told me they were selling the house, moving to Utah. She looked at the valley and said, "Your grandfather would be proud. You didn't destroy us. You could have." After she left, I stood there for a long time. I had won. I had crushed the opposition. But Red's voice was in my head again. The best revenge isn't burning their house down. It's building something that lasts longer than they do. I realized I had 12,000 acres of pristine wilderness, and keeping it locked up just for me felt selfish. It felt like exactly what Corinna would have done. So, I decided to go big. I contacted the Rocky Mountain Trust and proposed a conservation easement. I took 800 acres of the Upper Valley, the wildest, most beautiful part, and put it under permanent protection. It can never be subdivided, never be developed, never be touched. It's a wildlife corridor forever. Then, I worked with the new HOA board to build a hiking trail that connects the subdivision to the ridge line, crossing my land. Legal, regulated public access for the first time in 40 years. But the cherry on top? The money. The $50,000 in back fees the HOA owed me? I didn't keep a cent. I set up the Red Thorne Memorial Scholarship for local high school kids interested in environmental science. The irony was poetic. The money Corinna had tried to extract from the neighbors to sue me was now going to send their kids to college to learn how to protect the planet. On the day the trail opened, we had a barbecue. Over 100 people showed up. The same neighbors who had signed affidavits saying they were afraid of me were now shaking my hand, thanking me for opening up the mountain. Mr. Sato came up to me, grinning like a kid, and said, "Property values went up 8% since the conservation deal was announced. Turns out, people pay a premium to live next to a protected park." Corinna had fought so hard to protect their property values by fighting me, but peace was the thing that actually made them rich. Later that fall, I was sitting on the porch, watching the aspen trees turn gold, and I got the first essay for the scholarship. It was from a girl named Jasmine, writing about how her family had lived in the county for generations but felt pushed out by the wealthy developments. She wrote about wanting to be a scientist to ensure that land wasn't just for the rich, but for everyone. I sat there and cried, legit tears, because that was it. That was the legacy. I walked up to Red's grave in the little county cemetery that evening. I sat down in the grass and poured a little beer out for him. I told him, "We did it, Pop. The valley is safe. The spring is flowing. The gate is gone. And we didn't have to become them to beat them." The wind blew through the pines, that hushing sound that feels like the mountains breathing. And for the first time since I left Seattle, the anxiety was just gone. Corinna sent me a letter from Utah a few months later. Short, handwritten. "Saw the news about the scholarship. You did good. Sorry for the mess." I kept it. Not because I forgive her fully. She made my life hell. But because it's a reminder that even the biggest tyrants are just people, usually acting out of fear. So here's the takeaway, and I want you to listen close. If you are dealing with a bully, whether it's an HOA, a boss, or a neighbor, do 3 things. 1. Document everything. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. 2. Know your rights better than they do. Read the fine print. And 3. When you win, and you will win if you have the truth on your side, don't just salt the earth. Build something. Create a legacy that makes their petty power plays look exactly as small as they are. I'm Lucas Thorne. This is my valley, and nobody is ever putting a lock on my road again. Now, do me a favor. Go check your property deed. You might be surprised what you own. So, here is the question I want to leave you guys with. I had the legal right and the moral high ground to shut off their water. I could have forced them to truck in water for months, destroyed their home values, and made them pay for every second of stress they caused me. Elena said it was the nuclear option. I chose not to do it. Some of my friends say I was too soft, that Corinna and the complicit board members deserved the scorched earth approach for trying to steal my land. Others say that mercy was the ultimate power move. What would you have done? Would you have turned that valve and watched them panic? Or did I make the right call building a bridge instead of dropping a bomb? Let me know in the comments. And seriously, don't forget to check those deeds.